Brother, I have a question for you. Very well. Your inquiries have been bothersome, but we have time, I suppose. The Promethean line has ruptured. Fire races towards 5 workers trapped in a manufactorum bay. You can seal the blast doors and save them, but one wounded guardsman lies on the wrong side of the barrier. He will burn. Do you close the doors? Interesting for once. What would you do? I would close the doors, of course. I cannot risk compromising the rest of the manufactorum due to the inopportune positioning of a single guardsman. And why not? He dies for the greater Imperium, as does everyone else. You mistake pragmatism for wisdom. Then what would you do? I would add to the fire without hesitation. The possibility of failure and compromise of the facility would rise. Then let it. I would let the fires rise and carry the guardsmen through the flames to the other 5, before ordering them to close the blast doors as I blockade the rest of the flames, trusting my honor would endure what my flesh could not. That is a needless risk. It is my duty to the Imperium and to mankind, not a measurement given by statistics. Statistics give our sacrifice meaning. Then hear mine. What? 6 live.
We talked about Spec Ops on this channel before, but, it should probably be touched upon again since, stealth is pretty cool. Espionage is awesome. Not in the actual real world aspect, well, depending on who you are, but I'd like to think that a majority of people who are into things like 40k are also into Tom Clancy, Metal Gear Solid, maybe technically Deus Ex Machina? Is it Deus Ex Machina or Deus Ex? I never played the game, so I'm gonna be real, I just like the lore and watched videos about it. The idea of superbly trained operators with the best funding of any military could provide going off and doing some crazy operatorship is always cool. Hell, there's an entire business model of people who may or may not, and I'm leaning on the may not part, have been involved in the CIA or Special Forces operations and are now just going around and making books and going on podcasts talking about what they've done. That being said, I am also from a country that allowed Wehrmacht soldiers to be able to write their memoirs and get paid for it. Money is money, I guess. But Space Marines, right? They're the most popular faction. They sell well and every chapter has a speciality. But these guys, they can't be stealthy, right? Wrong. And there's nothing more terrifying than the idea of a silverback gorilla with more armor than a lifted Ford F-650 sneaking up behind you like they're Sam Fisher. But in a battle to reclaim the galaxy, sometimes stealth is the only option. So what do you end up getting? You end up getting the Raven Guard, and honestly, I like the Raven Guard. They're a lot more normal than I thought. I was expecting My Chemical Romance, and what I ended up with is like engineering students. But who are the Raven Guard? And why should you always keep your head on the swivel? Because there's no knowing what's out there in the darkness. Before we get into that, hello, I'm Dottie, I'm the man in the broken tower. Here again to deliver a late video because I was in abject pain, and that is my excuse. I'm working on a how-to homebrew video in the next coming weeks. Well, next coming week because I have a little bit of time off of work. For those who know, you know. So if you care about that kind of stuff, it'll be kind of cool. And I am trying to get back onto my normal schedule because I am going to be somewhat absent throughout the summer. Well, I'll try not to be, but I'm just going to get stuff planned ahead of time. Also assuming I don't hurt myself again because I'm an idiot. Memberships are open. You get access to the Discord, which reminds me I need to post a new link. You get your name on a model, which I also need to hurry up and finish on those because I need 20 Terminators and I have a list that requires 30 of them. And if you are Chosen or Warsmith, after a year of you being a member, I kit bash you into my army just as a thanks for you sticking around for so long. All right, we're not going to waste that much time on this part. I think that's a lie. You know the deal, the Primarchs were babies, then they got jettisoned out into the galaxy, and they were scattered all across said galaxy, and Corvus Corax, Primarch of the Raven Guard, ended up on Lycaeus, I think is how you pronounce it, a moon of his home planet, Kievar. The main planet was a forge world full of slaves. Corvus was discovered by one of the slaves and taken in, and of course, as always, the Primarch grew up super quickly. Most people in 40k don't find it strange, which is kind of funny, but for the people of Lycaeus, they saw it as a sign that Corvus Corax was there to save them. One thing about Corvus that should be stated, and clearly because of his upbringing, is that he absolutely hates slavery. He instantly went to work organizing the slaves into teams, stockpiling what weapons he could, and when there were no more weapons to steal, he just made some of his own, usually by improvising mining equipment. Corvus pretty much perfected guerrilla warfare and took a page out of the book of pretty much any country that gave the US a run for their money. Direct confrontation? That's cringe. We're gonna hide in the wilderness and we'll just pester you until you get bored or leave. But in the case of Corvus, he had to take it a step further. As they were merely on one of the moons, the slavers of Kievar retaliated. Corvus was ready, proceeding to not only dumpster the slavers, as he targeted their supply lines, but proceeded to destroy the manufactorums on the planet by using atomic mining charges. Okay, can we just take a moment, and why the fuck do these exist? I know what fracking is, but that applies to like drilling for oil, and it's not the same shit as mining. In what universe do you need to drop both Little Boy and Fat Man on some rocks? You aren't gonna get diamonds that way, my guy. Anyways, Corvus won at basically not much cost. Well, it should be stated that not all the slaves on the moon were good people, and some of them were actually criminals, and Corvus kinda killed a bunch of civilians. One thing about Corvus that should also be understood is that he's insanely pragmatic to the point of almost abject apathy. It's not that he doesn't care for his fellow man, but to him, the end justify the means. A lot of slaves died, but he tried to make sure that the criminals were on the front lines. And while he wasn't trying to kill every civilian on Kievar, what did he have to gain by sparing them at the cost of not destroying the manufactorums? Well, nothing. So he hit the big red button and nuked the manufactorums. Big E shows up as he always does, and how does it go? Well, given that Corvus is a loyalist Primarch and the meeting went pretty well, I'd say pretty good. Well, supposedly it did, because Corvus came out of it loyal to the Emperor and the Imperium, and it's kind of insinuated that the Emperor divulged some sort of secrets of the warp to Corvus. Why? Well, Magnus was a nerd who was always getting into psychic trouble and never stopped to think about whether or not he should, and not if he could. But why Corvus specifically? Why does he need to know? A little bit more on that later. During the Great Crusade, Corvus ended up getting his Raven Guard, and something I forget to mention is that every time a Primarch is reunited with their Legion, the Legion is mostly Terran-born Marines, and not the recruits from the Primarch's homeworld at the start, because obviously, Big E didn't know where the Primarchs were going to end up, so how was he going to recruit for those homeworlds to begin with? Most of the time, this meant that the Marines are not similar to their Primarch in pretty much any way. Usually, they might be the antithesis to their Primarch. We see this with the Night Lords, how they were a lot more honorable, and as time went on, when they started recruiting from Nostromo, of all places, they just became much worse. For the Raven Guard, it was the opposite, as a majority of the Terran-born Marines exemplified the same issues that Corvus took with the slaves on Kievar. They were just kind of awful people who were a bit full of themselves, and the problem is that they were in positions of command. So in order to fix this problem, Corvus did not in fact send them all to die in the meat grinder. He merely sent the Marines off on crusades to be lost to time. That's a bit of a jump. It is also one of the leading theories as to where chapters like the Carcharodon showed up, given that they were living in the void for millennia and continued to do so. Also, the Terra Marines used terror tactics, similar to the Night Lords. Wonder who that reminds me of. We fast forward to, oh god, the Drop Site Massacre. For several other reasons and conflicts between brothers as well as loyalty to the Emperor, Corvus was not on good terms with Horus, and it was incredibly apparent that the War Master was not going to be able to convert Corvus over to his side. So the Salamanders, Iron Hands, and Raven Guard all went down to Isstvan V, and we all know how that goes. The thing that you wouldn't know if you weren't a Raven Guard fan is that while Vulcan was hitting this iconic pose, and Ferrus Bandits was cosplaying Maximilian Robespierre, Corvus was putting belt to ass. Most people know about his fight with Lorgar being interrupted by Conrad Kurz, which is interesting because they mirror each other in a different light. It's the same conversation of what if their childhoods were different from one another? Would one have ended up like the other? Corvus had some pretty good role models on his homeworld. I believe he had like an older sister figure or instead of a mother figure, if I remember correctly. Also, I don't know if her story was ever concluded, but knowing she was human, she probably just died of old age or something at some point. For some reason, Corvus is the favorite kid of Big E's, and in the Primarch's anguish and desperation, he divulged psychic information onto Corvus. Big E needed warriors that Corvus could not provide due to what happened on Isstvan. So he gave him a helping hand. Corvus is like top 3 on loyalist Primarchs, and I'm putting him up there with like the Khan, and it's a tie between Sanguinius and Dorn. Big E knew that Corvus's intentions were pure. He probably was the most loyal out of anybody that was still around, and as far as I recall, at this point, Vulcan was also captured and being tortured by Conrad, so it was up to Corvus to rebuild his legion. Corvus was given the information of a lab that contained the genome of what would end up being called the Raptor Project. It was the DNA makeup of all the Primarchs and Space Marine DNA, which essentially is the precursor to what the Primaris Marines would become. With this, Corvus began making Marines, much stronger Marines who were the pride of the Raven Guard. Then these assholes showed up. The Alpha Legion having grafted faces of Raven Guard Marines onto their own to avoid detection. Jesus Christ. It tainted the genome with a mixture of mutagenics and demonic blood, because the mutagenics weren't bad enough. We just gotta put good old Satan HIV into this shit. This caused rapid mutations in the new Marines being created to the point where they looked more like possessed than just fucked up Marines. This forced Corvus to stop using the genome and cease rebuilding his legion, and left him to use what he had left over from the Raptor project. And despite the fact that due to the conflict with the Wordbearers and his own personal vow to destroy all warp and chaos-tainted creatures in the galaxy, Corvus refused to throw away the lives of his mutated sons. Despite that they were monsters, that they were his shame, he still cared about them. Corvus went on, however, to execute the more mutated of the Raptors, and I believe there are arguments that the Raptor program ended up being converted into the Raptor Space Marine chapter. Do I have any evidence to back this up? No, it's just the name, and that's what other people argue online because, I don't know, reading comprehension devil or something. I think that Corvus apologized to each Marine before killing him, and that shit is just fucking heartbreaking. It reminds me of the mission in Metal Gear Solid 5. We live and die by your orders, boss. Fuck, I wish that game was finished. Oh, by the way, Corvus hated the Terran Marines so much that he didn't even bother calling them back after Isstvan. Perturabo is crying tears of joy at this level of pettiness. We hit post-heresy, the scouring goes on, and Corvus continues to apply belt to ass across most of the Chaos Space Marine legions, leading to him entering the Eye of Terror to hunt down Lorgar, terrorizing him for millennia. Corvus has been in the warp for so long that he may or may not be warp tainted by this point. Well, it's not like warp corruption per se. Remember when I said that Big E spoke to Corvus in private? I believe that conversation and Corvus's change are related, but like I said, I have no proof. It's just a cool theory that Big E had some sort of foresight to warn Corvus and teach him how to bend the warp to aid him rather than corrupt him like it did his brothers. Lorgar has since left his little tower in the warp, and that means that Corvus now has free reign to travel around and hunt down Lorgar and kill any word bears that get in his way. But how did Corvus dispatch his foes? Apparently, he preferred heavy bolters, which is funny when you remember that he's the stealth guy. He had 2 Archaeotech pistols, which, that's just what they're referred to. There's nothing else. Like, it didn't specify what they did. That's just what they were called. He had a power whip, which I had zero idea he even had this. And I'm getting hit with, like, some weird psyop stuff because I've never seen this whip, and all of a sudden, I'm seeing nothing but the whip and artwork of him. He has his jetpack, which, of course, has those giant bladed wings, which I'm sure he decapitated people by just flying past them at some point. But what we all know and love are his lightning claws, which apparently are used by Kayvon Shrike. I don't know if this is correct. I'm pretty sure the claws that Kayvon have are made by Corvus and they're not the exact same claws, but I'm not going to question it. And of course, his Primarch ability. He actually has a named one this time around called Wraith Slipping. He does the Batman thing where you turn around for half a second and then all of a sudden he's gone. He can walk backwards into shadows and just disappear. Apparently, most of the Raven Guard share an ability somewhat similar to this, but it's not psychic in nature. And since we're done talking about Corvus Corax, why not talk about his sons? How are the Raven Guards so sneaky? Everyone has heard that Space Marine armor is as heavy as like a modern day tank, and it couldn't be used without a power pack, as you've seen if you've watched, I think it was Pariah Nexus or was it Ties? I don't remember. Shit, I actually don't remember. It's when Brutus gets his power pack shot to pieces and he's literally just aura farming, just walking forward with it, with his power armor completely disabled. And don't get me wrong, it's a very decent question, but there's 2 reasons as to why the Raven Guard are able to sneak around. Firstly, they're mostly just like out sniping or like fighting at mid-range. You don't have to be stealthy if you're not going to be in close combat. You're going to end up just shooting anyways. They usually utilize Phobos armor, which is a modified version of Mark 10 armor that allows for greater mobility and has servos that are made completely silent. And also it has a much smaller profile. There's a video of like cosplays of like Space Marine armor, and like just take a look at the difference between these two. I know it's mostly just engineering, but the fact that the guy wearing Phobos armor is moving way faster than the guy who's wearing Space Marine armor is probably telling enough to just, you know, how this armor is made. Yes, I know the dude who's wearing Phobos armor is not wearing it at scale accurate, but that's not the point. And here's the actual reason as to why they're so stealthy. They were literally trained to be ninjas. I don't know what the name of it is, if it's Shadow Step or something, but it's basically ninjutsu. And I'm not talking about like Naruto, I'm talking about the actual real martial art of ninjutsu that ninjas use to be able to sneak around and do crazy acrobatic stuff while maintaining complete silence. It's not a technological advantage, it's a tactical advantage. Now, how do I explain jetpacks and other stuff that they use? I got nothing, dude. You're playing 40k, it's a full-on skirmish game. Stealth at this point is gone, and even then, stealth in-game is just an ability that makes you harder to hit. Lone Operative is only given to like single character models, or if you're in like a unit with Kayvon Shrike or something, I don't remember. It's interesting because they also use suppressed bolt weapons, and hell, the Eliminator bolt sniper rifles also have suppressors. There's a bolt pistol skin in the Raven Guard pack in Space Marine 2, which I think also has a suppressor on it. Technically speaking, I don't think a bolt gun can be suppressed, or at least not in a traditional sense of how we understand, where like you could just slap a suppressor on a 22 and all of a sudden it's completely silent. But I mean, also just like go ahead and look at this. That's a tank suppressor. This is real. I don't think it's too far-fetched to say you could suppress press a bolter. So let's go ahead and talk about some Raven Guard specific stuff, since I'm going to be honest, these guys don't have that much going on. Okay, well, I mean, that's kind of a lie. We're only halfway through the script at this point. But they have sign language, and I think it's really cool that we have a few factions in 40k that are finding ways of communicating without actually like speaking normally to one another. It's not just another language like how the Night Lords have it, which is still cool, don't get me wrong, but it's in the same vein of like how the Sisters of Silence have sign language, and now so do these guys. And I guess in a similar vein, the Mechanicus, when they do binary screeching to each other, because it's much faster to transmit data to one another than it is talking. And also, anybody who doesn't have a proper implant won't understand what they're saying to begin with. It also turns out that the Raven Guard have a gene seed flaw called the Sable Brand, which is, it's kind of similar to the Black Rage, but not really. Instead of seeing the Horus and murdering everybody around them, it gets rid of their sense of self-preservation, meaning no matter what, the Raven Guard is going to keep fighting. All their limbs can be gone, and they'll still grab a knife between their teeth and try to cut your throat. We're past indomitable human spirit. This is just straight up psychosis. The only way outside of someone's behavior to know if they have the Sable Brand is if their eyes are completely pitch black, which I believe Corvus's ended up becoming pitch black at some point, which is interesting, but you know, he is a Primarch, so obviously he'd be able to handle it a bit better than his sons. To combat this, Corvus created an intense CrossFit regimen called the Threefold Path. And it is also a path that you need to follow in order to rank up in the Raven Guard, mastering ambush, stealth, and vigilance in order to progress to the higher companies, and only in the second company can you join after you become a master of all three paths, including Corspake, which is their sign language. Normally, this would mean that the first company is full of the biggest and baddest Marines, but that's also just like the normal case for most chapters. The first company always consists of hardened veterans, Terminators, and a bunch of other stuff, including the Chapter Master. I do believe the Sable Brand is less prevalent now, but it's still something to watch out for. Gene seed flaws, as much as the Primaris program has gotten rid of them, still persist in some form or another. Also, a part of their training when it comes to the recruits of the Raven Guard, they are tasked with literally catching a raven. Thrown out into the forests of Kievar, they are tasked to sneak up, catch, and snap the neck of a raven before it can somehow get away. This hunt takes months, if not possibly years, and once completed, a battle brother wears the skull of their raven somewhere on them like a charm. Only when they die is the charm taken back to Kievar, where it is buried on the world. The Raven Guard are pretty metal about their death ceremonies. It's kind of reminding me of salamanders, but I also just need to do more research into what other chapters do. Specifically for the Raven Guard, if it is deemed practical enough, a Space Marine is stripped of all of their equipment, their charm, and their gene seed before their bodies are left to be feasted on by carrion birds. At least they're conscious about recycling, I guess. The other thing about the Raven Guard, and I'm starting to appreciate more about loyalists, is that they're just nice. A lot of Space Marines are shown to have this holier than thou attitude, but when it comes to the Sons of Corax, they're more than willing to help and defend civilians. The Raven Guard are sometimes even sent out to inspire rebellions against tyrant regimes. All the while, of course, no one is truly free. The crown just merely changes masters. I forget if I mentioned it already, but Corvus is not a fan of the Imperium. He was extremely conflicted with how he felt about it, especially after freeing his people in his system. Nothing ever truly got better for anybody, but that was until Chaos came into the picture. Chaos are monsters, they are evil, and there is no shortage of what evil they can provide. The Imperium isn't good by any means, but it is sure as hell, at least back then, way better than whatever Chaos is offering. Between the Alpha Legion tainting his sons, Word Bearers being the epitome of chaos, and everything that Horus and his traitor legions accomplished, I'm not surprised in the slightest that Corvus is as bloodthirsty as he is. There are only two characters that are playable on the tabletop, and first we're gonna talk about Kayvon Shrike, the first of the characters that got shown off. Once captain of the third company, Shrike fucking hates the Tau after a failed defense against their third fear of expansion, where the Tau go out and conquer Imperial worlds. It's basically their own version of a Crusade. Getting ahead of myself, Bro was a Hive gang member, and when he got captured and endured an insane amount of torture, ended up killing all of his captors. The chaplains of the Raven Guards ended up seeing him as having a lot of potential, and despite the fact that he was very much against it, they ended up recruiting him and training him into becoming a Raven Guard. The name Kayvon is apparently meant to honor his old Ganger days, but he never explained why or how. After his previous third company captain got tossed into a dreadnought, because stealthy dreadnoughts are a thing apparently, Shrike ended up becoming the third company captain, which, if you recall, meant he had to master at least two of the Trifold Path, meaning he has mastered now two and is ready to try to master the third. Least I believe he did, unless I'm reading some of this incorrectly, which is entirely possible. I was raised in the US public education system, bite me. Anyways, during the Prefectia debacle, the previous chapter master got his head blown schmoove off by Shadow Sun, and after launching a counterattack and unsuccessfully killing the Blue Lady, Shrike was still voted as chapter master. He did not want this job, but you know what makes Shrike cool? After trying to take command stand for as long as he could, realizing that he was having self-destructive tendencies, he stepped down. He ordered the scattering, which was forcing the Raven Guard companies to span across the galaxy in the wake of the Eye of Terror, each company being given separate orders that would help build up to whatever Kayvon was planning. But after the death of the previous chapter master and most of his third company, Kayvon pretty much went into an intense depression. Almost all of his brothers died, his leader got killed. It was honestly probably his fault. Yet he was rewarded and talked about like he was the greatest thing since a Big E. Shrike had survivor's guilt, and it utterly consumed him. He ended up obsessing over one of the paths, which was ambush, and made the Raven Guard, instead of just stealthy operators who did reconnaissance and spy shit, into ambush predators who murdered and destroyed every down to their basic atoms. So before it was too late, he stepped down. So at least if he did die, it wouldn't shatter the entire chapter. So who did he appoint? God damn, look at this guy. The Lord of Deliverance, Isstvan V. Aside from having Drip to rival, no, he actually just beats his Primarch in Drip. Isstvan is pretty much Batman to Shrike's Red Hood, and I mean that after the death of the previous chapter master. Like I said, Shrike leaned really heavily into the art of the ambush, risking his own life for total obliteration of his enemy, whereas Sean became a true master of all three arts and was far more level-headed at the moment than the two of them. Not only did he take the Raven Guard from ambush tactics back to subterfuge spy networks and was basically turning them into loyalist Alpha Legion rather than just a Legion of Assassins or a League of Shadows. I get it. It works better than Court of the Owls, shut up. It's funny, I can't find where it's stated in the dialogue, but Shrike just tells Sean in the same breath that he's chapter master and he's gonna step down. I think it's described that Isstvan Sean was unceremoniously promoted to chapter master. Something very funny. Kayvon just said, I don't want this job, and here you go, bye, just left. But because of this, and because Shrike understood that he was not a good fit, the Raven Guard have found much more success in their operations. This reminds me a lot about Tushan. I wrote Heastan in the script, but I'm an idiot and I forgot Tushan's the chapter master. And it makes me enjoy the Raven Guard far more, because even at his lowest point, at his darkest point in his life, Kayvon Shrike knew better than anybody that he was never meant to be chapter master. And even when resigning, everybody accepted his successor openly because of the amount of self-awareness and reflection needed to guide your brothers to a better future, rather than letting everybody die in vain for pride and glory, is something that not a lot of Marines are capable of. I'm looking at you, Size of the Emperor. I think what makes the Raven Guard fun and unique, aside from being the sneaky guys, is that they're a chapter that understands that humans are not weak and need to be protected, but taught them to fight against impossible odds. And if you look at real life, yeah, that works. The entirety of the United States was founded because instead of conducting proper warfare, we had Peyote Pete grab a Kentucky rifle and decapitate a British officer from 50 yards inside of a forest. Guerrilla warfare works. An entire chapter of Marines that exist to inspire rebellions and have the level-headedness to not go running into every battle screaming their heads off. Is the idea of a stealthy space marine really that weird? Maybe, but if you want stealth and reasonable, we'll talk about these guys one day. I'm noticing a trend with a lot of legions that despite the memes, despite what people say, the loyalists are something for their Primarchs to be proud of. And when Corvus gets back, let's just hope his sons accept him for who he is, like he did with the original Raptors many millennia ago. To quote, "Give me a confident foe, one who believes in the strength of his warriors and the reach of his own arm. Give me an enemy who will commit swiftly and decisively to his course and forge ahead in the sure knowledge of victory. I will gladly prove his confidence ill-founded as the Raven's talons close around his throat and the shadows descend." Thanks for listening. Fuck! This is late, I'm so sorry. Members video soon. It's about the stuff that I've been buying if you're in the Discord, which, hey, if you're not in the Discord, join the Discord, you know, it'd be pretty cool. Game night is going to be upcoming this Wednesday. Hopefully, I don't think anybody is trying to hang out with me on Wednesday. I have more time this upcoming week because if you know my job, you know my job. And I'm going to try to be prepping videos because I'm going to be MIA at some point in July. That's because I'm going to be going out and doing some dumb stuff. As always, thank you to these channel members. I am once again so sorry that I haven't been here so goddamn long. Oh, and this time I actually figured out how I can organize my file so I don't have to put it through a program every time. So hopefully it's actually accurate this time around. The Hog, Toaster, Felicia. I have no idea if I'm still saying that right. They never told me. Mountain Papa 11, Josh from Allstate, Balding Dragon 62, Regular Alley, CB Drawer 95, Suspendor, Javier Soto, Matt the Jam Man, Overdraft Perfection, Envy, The Coffee Addict, Zachary Y, The God Emperor of R, Alexander McCabe, Ritz, Arctic Berserker, Adam M, Omidium, Captian Bubbles, and Corspore. And as always, an even bigger thank you to these folks for holding down the fort and still believing in me. And I think we have new members this time around, unless I'm blind. No, I think we do. Vulcan equals best Primarch. Joki Mitsu, 45, you motherfucker. I knew it. I knew it's you. Celtic, or Celtic. No one ever tells me anything. Human Spirit Indomitus. John Papa John. It still doesn't say Stumo, and I'm kind of sad about that. Icygo 11. Crazy Axeman. Commander Apo CC 1119. Solace in the Void. Fat Nuts Man. You son of a bitch. Nameless Ghoul Ease. Everlost Man. Gap G. Dism. Felix. Up, up, down, down, left, right. Istra. Robbie Nito. And Ape Brain Esquire. It feels so good to say that again. Oh my god. Rules for Kit Bash members should be coming out soon in the next week. I'm going to put it in video form so that way people can visualize things more. Next up is Chaos, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, we did Imperium, then we did Space Marines, then we're doing Chaos. Yep. Oh, also, expect something very different in May. I'm going to beat my ass to get out on time, but I promise it's going to be good. See you soon.